Welcome to the College Planning Seminar, More Than Just a List from the College Guidance Network. I'm your host, Brennan Barnard, and I imagine a lot of you who are tuning in are finishing up your applications for early decision and early action and thinking about how you tell your story through the application. And there are many ways to do that. And one way is through the activities you share and the honors you share and involvement. And so tonight we are going to unpack all that for the next half an hour and answer all of your questions. And the astute among you will realize that I am joined not by Dean Jay from UVA, but my good friend Matt Hyde. Dean Jay had a conflict come up, and Matt was kind enough to join us. And Matt is the Dean of Admission and Financial Aid at Trinity College. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks, Brennan. Excited to be here.
So for all of you who are tuning in, we are going to use the Q&A for you to get all your answers, your questions answered by Matt. And we're also going to use the chat. So if you could just share in the chat, whether you're a student or a parent or a counselor, where you're zooming in from, let us know all the good information about you. And while you do that, I'm going to ask Matt to share a little bit about his journey to where he is now.
Sure. Well, Brennan, again, thanks for the opportunity. Happy to join you in a spotlight anytime. So I've been working in admissions and financial aid since the 1900s, since 1999, when I launched from my experience at Bowdoin College as a polar bear undergraduate, and worked in secondary schools and admissions for 5 years between Northfield Mount Hermon School and Milton Academy. And then I was fortunate to have a fantastic boss and mentor who was a known quantity in the world of college admissions and financial aid, and followed him to Tufts University, where I was a Tufts jumbo in their admissions office for about 8 years. From there, journeyed down to Pennsylvania, where I was the director of admissions turned dean and AVP at Lafayette College in Easton, PA for 11 years. And now I'm a baby bantam, maybe a toddler bantam, after a year and a bit at Trinity College here in Hartford, Connecticut. So again, happy to be here. I love the work that I do for lots of reasons. Chief among them is the opportunity we have to be, a face and a voice for wonderful institutions like where I've been, but also to be champions and advocates for the students who honor us with their applications.
Well, thank you. And it really is. I mean, you've been at a bunch of different institutions, and the answers we're going to give tonight really apply to schools all over. So it's not just Trinity, or it wasn't just going to be UVA. It's really about kind of how students tell their story. And so let's start there. And please share your questions as you have them. But what counts? As students think about what they put in their activity section and how they share different things that they're doing, what counts and what doesn't?
Honestly, Brennan, it all counts, to tell you the truth. I mean, in my mind, and we could probably print this on a T-shirt, you are what you do. And as I see it, the young people that are thinking about college opportunity, one of their main currencies is the currency of time. And we are really curious about how they invest it. And let's understand that, when it comes down to evaluating applications, we're making massive assumptions based on incomplete information. So the enormity of a young person at 17, 18 years old can't fit into the confines of a common app. There's nothing common about them. But, they can share bits and pieces of their realities with us that we can begin to knit together into their story. So, I think the opportunity at hand for students who are applying to college and looking at that list is to inform the assumptions we're going to make based on your involvements. And happy to get deeper into that if you're interested. But, it all matters. If it's important to you, if it's a part of your life and you have vision for it continuing to be part of your life at whatever college or university you're dreaming of, then we want to know about it.
Right. Yeah, thanks. And I think it's right. It's less about kind of trying to get in your mind and share what we think you want to hear. It's more about kind of what you do, what is meaningful to you, and how you share that. I mean, because I think a lot of students, and this was another question that came in during registration, they want to know, should I emphasize quantity or quality? Like, how do I, there's 10 spots on the Common App. Like, do I need to fill them all? And how do I decide between those?
Yeah, it's a really important question. Quantity versus quality. If you are manufacturing things to fill a list with. Like we can see right through that for the most part. Um, you know, we are really interested in how you've explored you, your interests, your identities, how you engage the world around you and your community, your family, and all that, can be captured on how you're spending your time. So, the fact of the matter is, let's just agree now, Brennan, that these young people shouldn't try to become a product for college. The ancillary benefit of a well spent high school experience is great college opportunity. So I like to think that students have taken the time to explore themselves, certainly academically, and we'll see that on the transcript. But there is sort of emerging intellectual verve around their engagement co-curricularly, extracurricularly, socially, the responsibilities they have, within their community or their family, or the various communities they claim sort of a space in. So quantity versus quality, like, just think about who you are and how you engage the world, and what are those things that you're doing. Where are you spending your time, and what is truly meaningful to you as a part of your identity or your suite of identities that you claim. And then let them exist on a list. But then where if it really matters to you, don't let it just sit on the list. Bring it to life through the course of short answer responses, through your personal statement. Empower your recommenders to talk about these things that are important to you.
So so I think sometimes students, they get, especially when filling out the activity section, right? They get so fixated on kind of the drop down menu, right? Like, okay, what fits into this, right? And so I think it's easy to think about things in terms of, a certain club or organization, and that's easy to kind of quantify or to share. But what about something that doesn't necessarily fit there? How often do you see that on applications? Just like an interest a student has, or something they do as a hobby. Like how do
Yeah,
they?
more and more. I mean, we're curious about sort of the life of your mind, and how you're exploring it. We don't, I have my own biases of what I love to see, and what really gets me excited, and those that tend not to sort of get me all overly excited. But that's why it's a committee effort to try to figure you all out. But one of those things, Brennan, is someone who loves poetry and likes to play with words, and explore sort of their use of language. Maybe we'll see that if they've engaged deeply in a humanities curriculum. Maybe we'll see it if they are involved in a literary magazine, if their school has one. But if they don't, I'd still like to know that this is someone who really loves language and poetry, and is one of those students that is going to take a breath and find time to sit under a tree and explore sort of words and poems. If that's something that's really important to you, like, bring it. And I know it doesn't fit neat and tidily because there's probably not a poetry club, or there might not be a lit mag where you are. But if that's still part of you, like, we'd love to know more about it. And you have every license to sort of create that sort of nugget for us in that list.
That's really important. And I think so often, like I said, students think kind of it's kind of black or white, right? Like, if it's something I did at school, then I can list it there. And if it's not something I didn't do at school, then I shouldn't list it. I was just working with a student today that listed all the things they did at school, but then forgot that they were a camp counselor, right? And didn't put that. It's a huge part of who they are, but
Yeah.
put it. And I kind of brought that to her attention. And she's, oh,
Well,
yeah,
it's so important they did that, Brennan, because let's think about someone who is a camp counselor. Okay, awesome. You're probably getting paid to hang out with kids. Well, yeah, but there's so much more depth there. So what assumptions am I making about someone who's been elevated into that space of being a camp counselor? Well, assumptions I'm making is, one, they care about other people. They have an interest in other people's health and well-being. Do I know that for sure about other camp counselors? I don't. But am I going to start there with my assumption? I am. So I'm hoping that if this is truly a part of this young person's reality, that they add more depth and dimension to my understanding of, well, all right, you are a camp counselor. That's what you are. Well, how and why have you become one? And that's I think the trick of a college application is that to get beyond the what. It's very easy for us to know what your what is. We know what you're involved in. We know what you're engaged in. We know what your grades are. We know what city or town you're from. We know what your deals at home for the most part. But it's the how and why that we're trying to get to. So let's remember that the vast majority of candidates who apply to our colleges are capable, academically. Within that sea of capable, we have a whole lot of competitive, but we even can't admit all the competitive kids. It's the compelling within that competitive that we're looking for. And the compelling really sort of comes out of those students that give us the how, give us the why behind their involvements and their engagements.
So so they can, right, they can do that in the essay or additional information, or like you said, have the recommenders do it. But how do they go about doing that? Like, how have you seen that done well in the
Sure.
150 characters they have in the activity section?
Yeah, it's it's not necessarily easy to do, but that's where you don't want to water down what's truly important to you. Oh, there's 10 spaces, got to fill all 10. No, you don't. Actually, in fact, please don't. We're fine to see 2 or 3 if that's truly what you're involved and engaged in. But use that space wisely. Give us some clues as to what you do within that sort of investment of time. If you do have a role, like a formal role that has a title to it, let us know. We're really curious about how much time you are spending, week by week, month by month there. So spend time thinking about that. And then if it's truly a part of your identity and who you're going to become on our campuses, you have that additional information space that you're welcome to use. Don't overuse it. Don't try to put it all there. But if there's truly something that you feel like is not captured well in that list, you have a little more real estate to play with, but do it very thoughtfully and succinctly.
And do students need to have a resume? A lot of times they wonder, like, should I have a resume? Should I kind of cut and paste my resume into the other additional information section?
No. um, and this is coming from an admissions financial aid person at a college with a really intimate applicant pool. We have the time to curate our class student by student, and we take the time to read it all the way through. But when we see additional information and another 2-3 page resume with everything that we've already sort of known, yeah, you're welcome to, but don't feel like you have to by any stretch, because we're probably going to skip right over it.
Right. And definitely don't share one and think that, okay, now I've done my job and I don't need to fill in the activities, because the
Oh,
activity,
yeah.
I mean, I think that's sometimes what people, they make that mistake of like, okay, I'll just share this and not all the information's in there, so they have it, but that's not where you're looking for it. So
No, yeah, no, please don't do that. I mean, there have been times where in an admissions committee, and I look at a very soft sort of rating around involvement and engagement and leadership. I'm like, huh, what happened here? And well, there's nothing on that. They didn't share anything with us in that space.
right.
And then, well, let's look a little deeper here. And they're like, oh, we have an attached resume somewhere in that mix that the first reader and the second reader both didn't catch.
Yep.
So if you're not using that space well, or at all, you're vulnerable.
Well, and so you mentioned kind of how intimately you read applications. There's a question here in the chat from Adya. I'm curious to know, how long does the admissions office spend on each application, and are they reviewed by one person or more than one person,
Yeah.
with assessments averaged? How's that work?
So I've been working at selective and highly selective institutions where we do take the time to holistically review each candidate. Generally it is more than one person who's evaluating. And when I had been the first reader in the past, I would spend anywhere from 15 to 25 minutes with an application. More and more, especially in some of the larger pools, admissions operations and committees are deploying what's called committee-based evaluations, where you have two-ish a pair of folks reading applications at the same application at the same time. Generally one is looking at sort of the data, the academics, the rigor of program, the courses, the achievement and testings there in that space. So while they're doing that, another sort of reader is taking a look at your voice, your presence, the energy that you have to involve and engage in a community, and how you are captured by your recommenders. And then they're doing this simultaneously and sort of talking about it as they're doing this read collectively. And so that's generally 2 people that will take anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes. And at that point, that's the initial pass. From there, those that surface as being compelling and competitive will work their way into a committee review where there are more eyes passing over. Those that don't surface out of that space tend to be moved on.
Thanks. And that's really helpful. I'd be interested from those people who are tuning in, who are attending, to go into the chat and share, if you were an admission officer and you were reading an application, what would you prioritize? What would you think the most important part of the application should be? I'd just be interested to hear what folks would say. And while they're doing that, Matt, there's a question here about the order that folks share their activities. So should they put leadership positions and roles above personal passions? Like, how should they rank order those in the activity section?
Yeah, I mean, generally the Common App's asking you to do it in order of importance to you. So as you're gaining vision for your college experience to come, I'd like you to order those things and list them in the order in which you're thinking you're going to prioritize as a college student. Or, if they've been the priorities for you, give us a sense of what has trumped what in high school if you don't have a sense of what you are more excited about in college. But, those closer to the top of the list are ones that we feel like are more important to you. Some students, I think they need to put the most impressive looking ones at the top, but if that's not important to you, like, we'll get there eventually, don't worry. I'd rather be like, what's truly exciting to you it should be at the top of the list.
But the point is, read the directions.
Read the directions.
Oftentimes,
yes.
Oftentimes people don't really even see that there's a priority,
right.
And so put like, I played JV baseball for 1 year in my 9th grade year, and that's at the top, and you kind of scratch your head like,
yeah.
So there's another question here from Beth. How are leadership opportunities evaluated that are outside of school, like shift leader at a job or youth stage manager at a community theater?
Awesome. We love those. I mean, the reality is, stepping beyond the bounds or guardrails of a high school and exploring your interests beyond are compelling. Because again, what assumption am I making about someone who's done that? You leaned in, you're taking action to explore yourself and your interests beyond what's maybe might be sort of delivered to you or handed to you. You're having to hustle a little bit more to land those opportunities. And when you're elevated into leadership roles, either at a restaurant for work, or on a landscape crew, or as a stage manager at community theater, like, that's telling us other folks in your community, see you and appreciate you and are elevating the moment you have to be an impactful presence in that space. So we love those for sure. And I guess I would hammer home here, gainful employment is awesome. I see a lot of students trying to manufacture things that will look good for college. Like, the effort to earn a paycheck, like, there's a lot to be learned there about yourself. So, if you're trying to figure out, like, what am I going to do this summer and try to do something that looks good for college, like, I'd rather you not do that and just get a job.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think the same goes for, I think students often worry that, I have to take care of my younger sister every day after school, and it means I can't do a lot of the clubs as other kids are doing. And is that gonna ding me in college admission?
No, heck no. I mean, being an awesome, big sibling, or being, a grandchild of a grandparent that needs your help and support. I mean, if you're spending considerable time doing that, if you are supporting your parents, if they're not, native English speakers, and you're having to support them and their navigation of their day to day, like, we want to know that. I guess, Brennan, I'll put it to you this way. I had a really cool experience when I was at a previous institution, where I was asked a question about how do you capture the engagement, the involvement, the leadership, and how nimble are you in sort of doing that. And I shared two extraordinary cases. And again, our pools, no matter what college, university, they're full of ordinary kids doing some great things. But in some cases, you have the outliers, you have the extraordinary. And in this case, I shared two cases where they had the very top rating co-curricularly, extracurricular leadership. One, a wonderful student leader, a highly recruited lacrosse athlete at a Division I institution, was also, a student body president, and, a prefect, and a world-class whitewater kayaker. Okay, powerful, top rated in terms of the involvement, the engagement. And then I shared another kiddo who crossed the border every day in South Texas to go to his charter high school. He worked 35 hours a week all the way through high school at McDonald's. He had a father and and I think 3 little sisters, no mom in the mix, and he was responsible for those little siblings and bringing a paycheck home. He was also the first male cheerleader in that charter network's history. And I wrote a cool short answer about that. And it was about his spirit and his energy, but also said, great way to meet girls. Like, it was just a really good energy there. But these two students, very different realities. they're both powerful, and they have the exact same rating. So we can be nimble in how we apply our rating. So employment, family responsibilities, those are important to us, and they can tell us a lot about you.
And you still denied them both, right?
No, we admitted both of them, and they both enrolled. And that's what I love about college admissions. Like, you have two very different young people, and the idea that they share a college community, they're united by that college now. And I'm hoping they found each other, because they're both powerful, but had very different experiences in high school.
And they can use the additional information section to share some of that context, and again, encourage some of their recommendation writers to share it. But there's also, just on a very kind of like time sense, there's the family responsibilities kind of drop down in the activities that share that.
And that's where, don't be quiet about them. Make sure that your recommenders are aware. That's not cheating. Giving them a sort of a set of bullets of like, here's how I'm spending my time.
Well, I think that's a good way to think about it. Like, how do you spend your time? Because so often, I think students are thinking about it as like, they don't think about those things because it's just part of their DNA, right? It's part of who they are and what they do. And so it's not like an activity. It's just like, this is how I show up to my family, right?
Yeah, right.
So it's important to think about how to share those things.
But this is a moment in time to be introspective about who you are and what matters to you, and getting a sense of the shape of the lens that you're looking through at the world, and doing it with pride and with confidence. So this is a time to put a stake in the ground and say, hey, I'm awesome. I'm excited about me. Not in a haughty way, but in a way that shows sort of good energy and spirit, and an excitement to lean into life and learning with the right kind of attitude.
Yep. That's great. Well, so there are a couple kind of nuts and bolts questions here. If you play 3 seasons of a varsity sport, should you put them separately or together?
Separately.
Yeah. Unless, of course, maybe you need more space and then
if you're your own crew in 2 different seasons, in the spring and the fall, that can be together. If you're a runner that does 3 seasons, you can list track together and cross country separately. Or you do cross country and track. Like, you can lump them together in those sports if you need to have that space. But there's a lot of ways to be a successful track athlete. You might be pole vaulting, but a distance runner. So 2 different realities there.
So another question: how do you make your list stand out? Are school involvement, clubs, tutoring, etc., considered basic? So are there ways that you can make your list stand out?
Yeah. This is where I would ask you not to worry about what other people are doing, and about standing out. You be you, and take pride in what you've accomplished and how you've engaged. That's all you need to worry about. And do it with good energy and positivity, and not feeling like you have anything to apologize for.
Well, and I think so often students worry about how they phrase things, right?
Yeah.
Like, do they need to dress it up for you? Like, do they need to, if they're in the outing club, do they need to like kind of wax poetic about that, or do they just say outing club? Do they need to say kind of, how deep do they need to go, I guess?
No, like, again, outing club. I would be curious about, how much time, energy, and effort, week by week, and that's where the drop down, like, this many hours, this many weeks, this many sort of, out of the year, like, use that well. But then, outing club, there's lots of ways to get really excited and engaged. You essentially room for a bullet or 2 around, well, outing club, but I love to climb or in boulder. And, because, I have a different sense of someone who's bouldering and climbing versus someone who is, canoeing and, leading hiking trips. So, I mean, there's some nuance there that you can give me with about 15 words. So, use that, don't overuse that space. Don't put too many words in there, because you can. But just think about a couple of bullets that could be a little more granularity of like, all right, outing club, awesome. Well, give me a little bit more to go on there.
Well, and so I'm glad you brought up the kind of hours per week and things like that, because that's another space where students get kind of compulsive. Like, well, I spent 2 hours one week and an hour the next week, and I do this for maybe 12 weeks a year, maybe 13. And how much should they really be worrying about that?
Not worried. I mean, ballpark it, and we're not sending any any police your way to be like, whoa, all right, we need to comb through this and double check the work here. We're not auditing this at all. Yeah. But I would argue, like, I was a competitive runner through high school, and Yeah, I spent hours and hours a week running, but I also spent a lot of time, reading up, and becoming a student of being an athlete, and thinking about it. And like those are like you can blow that time up a little bit and wait more than just like, well, it meets twice a week for 45 minutes, so like don't worry about that. Just give us the ballpark.
And I spent hours and hours trying to keep up with you after.
We got a lot of fun, didn't we?
Yes, we did. So let's see some other questions here. What would it be okay to put an activity higher on the list but doesn't have that much quantity? Example, like an internship for 2 weeks. Like put that at the top of your list, even though you do sport for 16 weeks. How's that work?
Yeah, I mean, again, you are not fully formed adults. Okay. So if you had a recent experience that's giving you a taste for something that you're really fired up about, that's going to be part of your exploration of yourself and opportunity in college, like elevate it. But like in that sort of line and a half that you have, like give us a sense of what you did. If it was an internship, or if it was sort of the experiential sort of moment that you had that's given you a new angle of approach to college, like, yeah, elevate that, pop it up there.
What about things you did in your senior year, but not your junior year? Does that make you look bad? Or kind of, or the opposite? If you did something in your junior year and then didn't do it in your senior year, how much did you worry about those things?
I wouldn't worry much about those. I mean, we want to see consistent involvement, engagement in a handful of activities, not all of them. We are hoping that between 14 and 18 years old, you've explored yourself, you've tried things, and you've taken some chances. Some have worked out, and you continue to explore. Others just not feeling it. So don't overthink it in terms of how it looks. Just own it. I mean, you've done some wonderful things that you should be proud of, and share that with us as best you can.
Thanks. So there's a question here about research. If we did research and got school credit for it, would it be okay to include that in the activity section, or should they put that in the honors section of the education? Like where should that end up?
I would put it in the activities section. I mean, yes, you got credit for it, but my sense is, this was engagement over and above the traditional sort of high school day. And it's something that you were thinking about beyond sort of the standard classroom homework experience. I think of it, if it was research and there was some degree of output, whether it was a poster or some kind of publishing, like you can list it in either place. I would argue that we spend more time with the activities and involvement section than the honors section.
Mm,
So that's where I put it.
okay, that's helpful. What about red flags? Any red flags you see, or mistakes you see students making in the activity section?
Red flags. I mean, not, this is where, if you are a junior or senior in high school, like you've engaged, you've explored, and like the writing's already on the wall and what's going to be in that space. So don't try to overdo it and force things in there, especially if they aren't all that meaningful to you. But those who've been very focused on one or two things, we generally there's more to you than you think. You're a little too comfortable saying, this is me, this is my identity, and I'm excellent at this, and this is what I focus on. Think a little more broadly about some of your other time when you're not doing that one thing, to add a little more dimension to your existence.
So speaking of dimension, there's two questions here, and I'm going to kind of put them together. One
Mhm.
is about how important is it for students to do research, because a lot of families seem to be asking about that. And then the other one is, how do you look at summer programs taken at colleges? I see a lot of kids spending tons of money on these programs.
Yeah.
So that whole idea of kind of like, how important are these pieces of things?
You are a high school kid. We have no expectation that you've done scholarly research beyond what's expected in high school. We're not like, oh, where's the research? We're not doing that at all. If it's there and you've done it, we're happy to see it. But by no means is there an expectation that it's there. I value students who want to explore their interests academically in summer programs. That's awesome. If this is truly of interest to you, whether it's a writing program whether it's opportunities to do some marine science that you haven't done because they didn't offer it in high school. Like, yeah, go ahead and engage. If you're fortunate enough to have the resources to bring that to life, do it. If that's really, truly interesting to you, but do it for you. Don't do it for us. Those that tend to manufacture those summer experiences where it's sort of surfaced in that summer space, and then there really wasn't anything else around it, that suggests that, like, oh, that makes sense. We can side eye that a little bit, and this is where, again, the value of a well-earned paycheck is more interesting, I think, to many of us than taking a summer class. And don't think that those summer programs at a specific college is gonna be like, ooh, this is going to elevate my chances. No, that's going to elevate the revenue for those institutions. It can give you a taste of what it's like to be in that city and at that institution, for sure, and that can be very helpful as you're sort of mapping out your list and what's really interesting to you. But don't do it for the sake that you think it elevates the chance that you have at those institutions.
Yeah, well said. So we are at the end of our half hour. I will end with one question, and that is this one about kind of the balance between modesty and bragging. And, for a student who might feel a little uncomfortable kind of tooting their own horn, like how do you suggest they think about that?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, as you surface as an emerging young adult, you need to be comfortable having pride and good energy for yourself and care for yourself. Each and every one of you has a distinct story and voice and presence, and we're excited about you surfacing in our communities and leaning into them with great energy and an awesome attitude. And so we want students who have a good sense of themselves, or are working towards that, and celebrate themselves a little bit. Again, not in a way that suggests that you are all about you. We want students who have a care for other people as well. So I would err on the side of the humble brag, then on, like, oh, they'll know, like, I'm awesome, but they'll figure that out. No, bring it, share it with us, and we're not sort of worried about you sort of coming across as like, wow, they have way too much pride. Like, no, like we like that excitement for yourself.
Right. Yeah, this is the time, right? I mean,
Mhm.
so often as students grow up, we say, don't show off and don't brag, but this is the time to not brag but be proud.
Yeah,
So
be proud. Yeah, pride. No doubt, this is for sure. And if you
look at
need a
that.
shot of cuteness here before you go,
Yep.
yeah,
If you're stressed about applications, go find a dog.
go find a dog. I'm hugging this one for you.
Matt, we are so grateful for you, and thank you all for tuning in.